With the new year upon us, it's time to start thinking about how we can be more successful and stop failing in our digital transformation and ERP efforts. But how exactly do we do that? That's what I want to talk about here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach the third stage of digital transformation success. And I've been in the ERP implementation and digital transformation space now for about 25 years. And what never ceases to amaze me is how often organizations make the same problems now as they did 25 years ago. Technology changes. We've got all these emerging new cool things that are helping us with our technology initiatives. But at the end of the day, organizations continue to make the same exact problems they were making 25 years ago when I first started in my career. So what I wanted to do today is break down to 5 simple things that organizations can start doing today here in 2025 and beyond to stop failing in their digital transformation initiatives. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. One of the key reasons why organizations fail in their digital transformation initiatives is because they bite off more than they can chew. In other words, what organizations do is they take on too much at once and they try to change too much in too little time. Oftentimes, organizations look at all the cool things that you could be deploying within your technology initiatives. Software vendors are convincing you that they've got the greatest, newest, sexiest technologies out there, which may be true, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you should be implementing all this stuff all at once. When organizations take on too much change in too little time, the organization eventually resists that change, even if the technology is the best thing for the organization or if the change is the best thing for the organization. So what needs to happen instead is organizations need to take a more measured approach to how they go through a transformation. It's not the end of the world if you take a more incremental, slower paced approach to change. You don't have to go with a big bang approach and just take on all the coolest new technologies all at once. You can slowly change and slowly start to adapt to some of these new technologies that are out there, certainly keeping in mind some of the longer term possibilities with some of the newer, more emerging modern technologies, but also recognizing that the technology industry is always going to be light years ahead of where your organization is, and that's okay. That's their job, and that's your job. So what we have to do instead is figure out how can we move at a measured pace that makes sense for us as an organization. How do we consider the culture that we have today, the culture we want to have in the future? How do we consider our tolerance for risk, our ability to change, and just be realistic with yourself about what you really can or can't do within a certain amount of time. And if you do these things, then you're more likely to end up in a situation where you have a realistic project plan, you're able to consume the changes that you want to go through, and you're not pushing the organization so hard that it ends up either breaking the organization or causing the overall project to fail. So one of the biggest things you can do to be successful and avoid failure here in 2025 and beyond is to make sure that you are realistic with your overall plan in terms of making sure you don't bite off more than you can chew. A second thing that you can do to avoid failure in 2025 and beyond, which is similar to the first thing I mentioned, but a little bit different, is that you want to be realistic about your implementation plan and your overall strategy. I talked before about how you don't want to take on more than you can consume within a short period of time, but even once you've defined what your comfort level is for the amount of change you're going to take on, now you need to look at, well, how long is that going to take us? How many resources is it going to take? What's the budget really going to be? And you want to make sure you're realistic about it, because even if you've sort of scaled back your expectations a little bit on what you're going to take on in the short term or the intermediate term, you also want to be sure that that plan in terms of resources, budget, and timeline are realistic and that you have the right allocation and the right mix in that overall strategy. Too oftentimes organizations think they've got a realistic plan and a scope that makes sense for them in a scope that seems realistic and isn't going to break the organization or break the culture, but at the end of the day, they still budget too little time, too little resources, or they don't realize how much money it's going to take to make that project successful. So one of the biggest things you could do is be realistic, and if you're realistic, what's going to happen is you're not going to end up in that trap that a lot of organizations fall into when they're unrealistic, where they end up cutting quarters later on when they try to force fit the project into a artificially compressed timeline or budget. So being realistic is one of the best things you can do to avoid failure. One common mistake I've seen organizations make for 25 years now is that they end up getting really excited because they've chosen a new technology or a suite of products that they want to deploy to the organization, and they end up jumping in and just start rushing to get straight to implementation. What they do in the process is they jump in without understanding where they're going, how they're going to get there, and understanding where they're starting from. And the reason that happens is because they didn't take the time up front to focus on phase zero planning. And phase zero planning is really where you start to look at all the things that you need to have in place to ensure a successful project. These include things like your overall change strategy, how you're going to change your business processes, making key decisions around how you might standardize or consolidate different functions or processes or workflows within your organization, understanding what your data strategy is going to be, understanding how your architecture is going to look and the integration between systems, and having a really good view of what it is you have today, where you're starting from, and where you're going. If you skip this phase zero step of the project, you end up not having a clear vision of where you're headed. You end up with a lot of internal misalignment, and you end up, quite frankly, just guessing as to what the overall implementation plan and timeline and budgetary needs are because you don't know. You haven't taken the time up front to do that phase zero, which allows you to have a really good understanding of what the real solution looks like and what the real roadmap should look like. Now, if you'd like to learn more about what phase zero is and what some of the different things are you should think about, I want to share with you two resources that might help. One is this YouTube video right here that dives into phase zero in a lot more detail. I unpack all the different work streams within phase zero, and that'll give you a good sense of what it is. You can also download this checklist. Just scan this QR code right here. It's a phase zero checklist, and it'll give you a visual understanding of just some of the key things you want to make sure you do before you jump into your implementation. And if you do these things, you're setting yourself up for much more success than if you were to skip or gloss over this phase zero. The next thing that you need to do to be successful and to avoid failure in your digital transformation is to invest in change management. The people, human side of change is going to be the most difficult part of your transformation. And that's been the case for 25 years now. Yet for 25 years now, I've seen so many organizations who underestimate the importance of change management. They assume for whatever reason that change won't be difficult because it's just an IT project, or they assume that people are ready for the change because they hate their old systems or they're ready for new technologies. And on the surface, this may be true, but inevitably, when you dig below the surface and you start to get into the details of the change, you start to recognize that people do push back. They inevitably will push back, not because they're trying to sabotage the project, not because they're bad people, but because change is difficult and it's personal and it's going to affect them. So one of the things you have to do is invest in change management to overcome this. And change management is a very broad category of work streams, but I want to share with you the two things that are most important within change management. One is an organizational readiness assessment, making sure that you assess the current culture and proactively identify what those potential organizational landmines are. And secondly, you want to make sure you have internal alignment. You want to make sure you take that time up front to make sure that your executives, your mid-level management, your project team, they're all aligned and rowing in the same direction and have clarity as to how this project is going to support the overall goals and objectives of the organization. It won't solve all your problems, but it'll ensure that you at least have clarity on the direction you're going, and it'll give you more clarity when it comes to decision-making as well, which will make the change easier later on. Now, these are just two really important aspects of change management. There's a lot more that I could share with you. And in the interest of time, I'll share with you another resource that I think will help, which is our Guide to Organizational Change Management. You can scan this QR code right here, download that for free on our website, and it dives into a lot more detail of what change management is and how you can manage it to help avoid failure in your digital transformation. Establishing project governance and controls internally within your organization is another way that you can avoid digital transformation failure in 2025 and beyond. Now, just to back up for a second, it's important to recognize that project governance and controls is something that needs to rest within your implementing organization, not the software vendor, not the system integrator or the value-added reseller, not even your third-party consultants are the ones to provide that actual governance and controls. Only you can provide that. And the reason for that is because it's your project, you're in charge. You can't just outsource everything to a software vendor or the technical resources and assume that they're going to keep things on track. That's ultimately your job. And the reason for that, in addition to ownership that I mentioned, is because the software vendors are only responsible for one work stream within an overall program. So you need someone sitting over all these different work streams to manage the controls and the governance and make sure that things are staying on track and that the project and the progress of the project reflects what is expected within the organization. Your technical resources will likely provide project management of their individual work stream, but this is a way for you to tie together all the different pieces, including the technology, the people, the process, the strategy, the data, the architecture, all the different things that go into an overall digital transformation. The overall governance and controls sitting over the overall program is something that will help ensure that you don't fail in your digital transformation efforts. And independent third-party consultants like Third Stage Consulting can provide those sorts of resources and guidance and frameworks to help you provide the program management, the governance, and the controls to make sure that the project stays on track. So I hope this is providing some guidance on how to make your project successful and ensure that you avoid failure in 2025. I also hope that this has given you some ideas on how projects and organizations have continued to make the same problems over time, but I want to give you the tool set here to be able to break the chain and to make a change here in 2025 and beyond to ensure that your project is successful and that you avoid some of the common pitfalls and failure points that so many organizations have experienced over the last 25 years. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how to be successful in your digital transformation, I encourage you to read our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 Digital Transformations. You can read that for free, scan the QR code right here, go to the links below. You can find that, get it off our website, and it'll give you a lot more guidance on how to ensure that you avoid failure and you set yourself up for success in the future. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day.